Welcome to the Leadership Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Jono White. I'm the founder and principal consultant of Clarity. We are an Australian-based consultancy that works with leaders around the world, and our passion is to invest in people to become everything they're meant to be in order to fill the world with healthy organizations that people love to work for and customers line up to buy from. The goal of this podcast is to invest in you and your leadership. If you're just joining us for the first time, then feel free to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, the most popular being our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from around the world in all different sectors give their in-depth answers on leadership, what books they love, what they found most challenging, the most meaningful stories, how they structure their time through the day. That's free, so go and check it out. And we'd love to interview you about your leadership. I believe you have advice from your experience, your context, and your life so far that is important and can help other leaders. It's also a great way to give back. It's free to get involved, and you can do so by going to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or just Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form that pops up. We have a free resource for you on our website. It's called Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook. It has interviews with 10 world-class leaders, and you can go to consultclarity.org. It's right at the top, and get that today. We also have a daily email that we send out to over 15,000 leaders, and that email contains the highlights, our best content from our podcasts, our blog, my book, the books that we're loving that are out there about leadership. It's also the best way to get access to our masterclasses and workshops before anyone else. And there's also exclusive and limited special options just for subscribers. And you can subscribe by going to consultclarity.org/subscribe. Now, my gift to you is to work incredibly hard to provide the best leadership content I can to invest in you and your leadership. So if you're finding our content helpful, if you find this podcast helpful, then your gift to me could be this. If you do find it helpful, then write a review or rate our content and make sure you subscribe or follow. I can't emphasize enough how helpful that is. It really does help us to get the word out there so we can invest in more leaders to become everything they're meant to be. It also means a lot to me personally when people like you and people in our community share our content on social media. So if you do that, then please do look for me, Jono White, to tag me, and look to tag Clarity on whatever platform you're on. And our team, including me, I'm always looking to see when people have mentioned us so that I can engage with you. And also we look at sharing content. So if you write something about something we've done, there's also a good chance we'll share that with our followers. So if you could do that, that is a massive, massive help as we try to invest in as many leaders as we can around the world. Last of all, you can check out my book about how to deal with difficult people even if you hate conflict. It's called Step Up or Step Out. It's available on Amazon. You can just look up Step Up or Step Out Jono White, or you can go to store.consultclarity.org/book and check it out there. I have coached leader after leader after leader, and in more than 50% of the sessions, this topic comes up. How do I deal with this person? I'm finding it really difficult, and I just want to find a way that doesn't blow up, to just to have a difficult conversation, to lead them better. How do I do that? There's a 3-step process that I outline in this book that I believe can help you. Okay, let's get into today's episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Enjoy. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Today's guest is Stuart Marquardt. Stuart is the principal of Lindisfarne Anglican Grammar School. Welcome to the podcast, Stuart.
Thanks, Jono. Good to be with you today.
Yeah.
Thanks for the invitation.
Oh, I've been looking forward to having a chat with you. First of all, like I said before we started recording, there's a bunch of educators who listen from Australia and also beyond. but a lot of people who are leaders, entrepreneurs in all different sectors in all different countries around the world. So tell us a bit about Lindisfarne, and also tell us about the role of principal and what you do.
Lindisfarne Anglican Grammar School is a beautiful school on the Tweed coast in northern New South Wales, right on the Queensland border. And it started as a little Christian community school back in the late 1970s. Ken and Ron Dyson and the parishioners at St Cuthbert's Church, Anglican Church, Tweed Heads. Ken and Ron had a vision. There should be an aged care home. There should be a school for children of the parish. And that vision became a reality in 1981. And the school's grown since then. So we've still got the original campus at Sunshine Avenue, Tweed Heads, very close to the Tweed River. And then we have a much larger campus at Mars Lane, Terranora. And we educate about 1,783 students across both of those campuses now, when we just started with a handful of students and one demountable building. So the vision and the dream became a reality. There's an incredible story around that. People say, well, why Lindisfarne? That's an unusual name.
Yeah.
Well, the Bishop of Lindisfarne in the UK was St Cuthbert, and the parish that started the school was St Cuthbert's Anglican parish. And also Lindisfarne, the Isle of Lindisfarne in the UK, is situated on the Tweed River, and so is the school. And then St Cuthbert was an early pilgrim who spread the word of Christianity. And obviously, we have a Christian school where we have an Anglican background and an Anglican ethos. So there's a lot of synergy there, hence Lindisfarne Anglican Grammar School. And now we cater for students, interestingly enough, from the southern Gold Coast, from the Tweed Coast, and from northern New South Wales. So our catchment's from Robina through to Byron Bay and out to a little community called Yukai, just in the hinterland behind the coast.
Wow.
So it's a pretty beautiful part of the world. We're on the Queensland border. So for those people maybe listening in from around Australia or around the world, we had over the last 2 years the border closed for most of the time.
Yes.
And we had nearly 300 students and 54 staff living in Queensland who are coming to school and coming to work each day with border passes, and we're completely locked out for 3 or 4 weeks at one stage. Very interesting and challenging times, but we've come through the other side. Like most of the world now, we're all living with COVID, but it's certainly been a time of great challenge. And as a border school, we call our region, because we are involved in both states, we call our region the border region, and it's just a special place to be.
Yeah, for those who aren't that familiar with Australian geography, it's got to be one of the most beautiful parts of Australia, if not the world. I mean, I'm based in Brisbane, which is 150 kilometres north of where you are, Stuart. Must be around there from down to Tweed.
Yes, only 100 kilometres.
But just a stunning part of the world for anyone who's looking for destinations. I think most people are post-COVID, just trying to go anywhere. You can't beat Stuart's part of the world. It's just stunning down there. But let's chat about you, Stuart. I'm really excited to hear some of your story. Let's start with growing up and your childhood. As you think back to that season of your life, what were some of the moments or even themes that really shaped you into the person and the leader you are today?
Gosh, it's such an interesting question, what shaped you from your childhood. And I'm thinking, well, first of all, I had a loving childhood. I have a brother and 2 sisters, and there were 4 of us. And Mum and Dad worked incredibly hard to give us opportunity. And the town I grew up in, Wandai, there's about 1,000 people there. A beautiful little town to grow up in, and I still actually refer to the town as home, even though I haven't lived there since I was 18 years of age. But it still feels like home whenever I go back there. And I guess growing up in a family in those times, there wasn't a lot of discretionary spending, but I guess we were better off than many families in that we had the basics of life well catered for. We had a loving home, a house, food to eat, clean water to drink, access to medical treatments, etc. But we didn't have much spare money. But again, I felt blessed because each year, regardless of the season, and Dad was involved in running a carrying business supported by Mum, so carting grain and peanuts and distributing fuel and so forth, and mail runs and milk runs and all sorts of things. But there wasn't a lot of discretionary income. And just like farmers, we often don't think of the related businesses, but if it rains too much, or if there's an extended drought, or if the crops fail, well, no one's buying fuel, or no one needs the produce carted, for sale, et cetera, et cetera. So it has a chain reaction right through the whole community. So the lack of discretionary spending, it did lead to an aspiration in me to try to have a stable occupation and I guess a financial base, for me, for my family, for those I love.
Yeah.
I've worked very hard with, now my wife on that. And my mum and dad wanted that for each of us as well. And they were very heavily focused on education. And this is interesting because Mum and Dad both left school in year 6. Mum to go into work in Brisbane in a lingerie factory or business where she made handmade lingerie, and Dad to work on the family farm, a dairy farm, a cattle stud, and milk cows, and do all the things that come with that. And then later on, at the age of 28, to purchase his own business, supported by Mum, and to run that business right through till he retired around 67 or 70 years of age. He worked right through. So there was a strong work ethic as well in the family, and that shaped me a lot as well. Always worked very, very hard, and Mum's and Dad's emphasis on education really stuck with me. Look, the other thing very interesting with Mum, I recall, was that she would read medical books every night, and her Bible. She was a very devout Christian. But she was very, very clever and never had the educational opportunities that I've now had in my life. And one of the reasons she used to read all those medical books was, there wasn't Medicare. Going to the doctor was expensive. So you only went to the doctor if you were, about a kilo over. Yeah. Otherwise, you did everything at home. And Mum knew just about every remedy and everything that was wrong with you. Wow. You didn't actually need to consult the doctor. It's very interesting. So I remember her intellect in that way. And then Dad's intellect, it came through a lot with service to the community. He was in local government for 22 years and served the community in that way. And,
wow.
And also was incredibly talented at spelling for someone who went to year 6 at school. I remember in my university studies doing, Dad, how do you spell? And he could just reel it off. So he was, again, just didn't have those opportunities for further education. And look, one powerful story that when you say things that shaped you, and I guess it's about putting your children first, which is a really important message for us as leaders to always consider, amongst everything we do, the vital role we fulfill with our own children. And I remember when I was about 16, one of my very good friends, who I'm still friends with today and went to school with, made a comment to me during one winter where, gee, your mum must love that green dress because she always wears it. And, I thought a lot about that comment, and that comment did have that double edge to it. I think there was a little bit of sarcasm attached with it. Well, maybe she doesn't love it that much. She just wears it all the time. But, I thought about that a lot over the years, and I realised one of the reasons Mum wore that green dress every year for a number of years was that, any discretionary income was going into the kids. So Mum would do things like, we did things that a lot of country kids didn't get to do. We did all our sport and all that sort of thing, but we still did art class, and we did theatre and junior drama, and we did music lessons, and even a couple of times we drove all the way to Brisbane, which was quite a trip in those days, to the ballet. And that just wasn't the sort of thing that country kids were doing back then. So
Yeah.
we're blessed in that way as well. So mum exposed us to the arts as well, and then that's where any sort of discretionary income was going. And we always, despite the difficulties with the seasons that country people face, we had 2 weeks at the beach every year. So again, we were luckier than most. And
Yeah.
we'd go to Harvey Bay, beautiful spot in Queensland when we were younger, and then we'd go off to Maroochydore when we were teenagers. We always went to the same place, and that was kind of good because you got to know that place, and it was almost like a second home. You'd look forward to those 2 weeks each year, because that was the only time we'd go away.
Wow.
Interesting times, and all these things do shape you.
They do.
And we were always involved with Sunday school and church, and that's given me a faith, a Christian faith, but it's also given a really good values base that I've tried to live out and come back to. You do lose your way, and certainly I'd be amongst people who, during the teenage years, I wasn't a perfect teenager or young adult, but I don't think any of us are. And, you eventually come back and realise, the path you should be on and choose that path, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the way you just expressed that is, I can see just from hearing that why I imagine students would resonate with that, because I think if there's one thing young people pick up on, it's that authenticity, and they want to hear that humility and vulnerability. I don't have it all together. I know what it's like to be a teenager, as an example, which I was chatting with friends recently, and we were just saying, wow, how much would you have to pay me to go back to being 14? No amount. It's such like just picking that number as one age where it's like, oh, wow, that's a tough season as a human being to be 13, 14, 15 and working life out. And I want to ask you, how much of an influence did your parents and their education, both going to grade 6 and yet both having such a love for education, that's what it sounds like from what you talked about, how much has that influenced your passion for education?
Oh, enormously, really. Yes, it has. They continued to learn throughout their lives, and that's stayed with me. Absolutely, it shapes you. And they were lifelong learners, and I believe that I've followed that path as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's thank you so much for sharing those stories. So for you, Stuart, as you reflect, what was one of the first leadership opportunities? What springs to mind? A chance where, when you were very little, or for some people it's even 20s or 30s, it depends on the journey, where you had your first
Yes.
time to really carry a project, cast vision, you had people reporting to you, whatever it was, where you look back and think, yeah, I think that was my first real leadership opportunity. What comes to mind?
Look, there's a few that go back to the school days. I always got involved in just about everything going at school, and I'm a bit wired that way. And look, one of the things I remember is being treasurer of the student council in year 9 of high school. And that was interesting because I had to go and open a bank account, believe it or not, and have a signature and do a monthly report on the finances of the student council. And one of our main income sources was making icy cups in the Queensland summer and then selling them at lunchtimes. And making sure that we had enough icy cups to meet the demand from the students. They were pretty popular, and then accounted for the funds and then invested the funds and did all of that sort of thing. So that gave me a real sense of responsibility. A couple of teachers saw some ability for public speaking, and they encouraged me to get involved in some of the competitions like Lions Youth of the Year that's been running forever, and debating, Apex debating, and those sorts of things. And there was a real responsibility that came with that, because you're a part of a team. You had to prepare, and if you didn't prepare and play your role in the team, you'd let the team down. So that's one of the things. And then later on, even at university, I'd take on roles within the residential college that I lived in, and just contribute to some of the social life of the college by taking on the organisation of certain events or activities. Whether that be a hungy that a friend of mine and I decided would be a good idea to do without any experience in that form of cooking, and having to then realise that we now have a responsibility for feeding 100 people. And so just embracing these opportunities. But in career-wise, I would say it's really when I started my career in outback Queensland in Boulia, which is about halfway between Mount Isa and Birdsville in outback Queensland. So when I worked in Canada years ago and I'd cross the border into America, they'd say, "Oh, you're from the outlands." Well, it's actually the outback. But look, I had enormous responsibility very quickly there, because I was in a community of 300 people, with about 100 attending the school, with 4 teachers and about 4 support staff. And you just had to do everything
Wow.
yourself, really. And that was good, because you had to take responsibility and demonstrate leadership, not just for the students in your class, but across the school in general, within the community, joining local committees and organisations. And it is where, though, I also was tested, I guess, first time in leadership, and where my interest in Indigenous education and social justice and our First Nations people, our Aboriginal people and
Yes.
Torres Strait Islander people came from. Because, I'm talking 1985, I'm not talking that long ago. But I want to share a little bit about this, because it's really shaped
Yes.
my thinking today, and
Please
I'm
do.
still learning in this space. But I found, rightly or wrongly, I'm not saying it was intentional, but there was this almost underlying discrimination that was occurring on a daily basis in the school. For example, the Anglo-Saxon parents would come in for parent help, but the Indigenous parents wouldn't. And I started asking questions, well, why is that? And it really was because they hadn't been invited in. No one had said, it'd be great if you came in for parent help. It wasn't disinterest. Or wouldn't come to the school necessarily always for a parent-teacher interview, but would be happy to meet on a footpath, or outside or under a tree, and talk about the progress of their child. When I first went to the school, only the Anglo-Saxon kids took home reading books, and the Indigenous children didn't.
Wow.
That troubled me deeply.
Yeah.
And so we made calico bags. All the kids painted them. We sent the books home. The kids started to bring them back every day. Their reading improved. And one day, a group of children forgot their books, and I said, "Well, where were you last?" And they said, "We're down by the river swimming." I said, "Well, do you know where you left the books?" "Yeah, they're hanging in the tree." And I said, "Well, why don't we get them? We get the books." And I guess that showed also that the books are valued, aren't they? But we found the books. It wasn't a big deal. We get so tied up in we might lose something, but we lose more by not extending the resource, don't we? You really thought a lot about that. And
Absolutely.
and then I would see, other examples of that as well. I could go on extensively about those things, but it did shape me, I guess, is the point I'm trying to make. It made me think really very much about the role we can play in closing the gap, the role we can all play in reconciliation. These are things I talk frequently with our school community and our students about, because this will be the next generation of people who will work in life beyond school, and I think can make an enormous difference. So it really started a lifelong passion and interest for me in supporting our First Nations people to the best of the ability that I have, knowing that there are mistakes I still make and things I don't get right, but to do the best I can with that.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, because I can only imagine being in your shoes, and it sounds like that must have been so confronting, and the injustice must have, it really seems like it just hit you in the face. And yet at the same time, I'm sure to those who'd been there a long time, it was normal. And that brings up for me the question of what have you learned about how to lead social justice when you've got different stakeholders where people have maybe they're not even aware of prejudice that they have, and that the right thing to do or that is to lead in a certain direction. How do you take people on a journey? How do you lead? Because that's a question I'm wondering. I've got my hand up going, how do you do that? Because I think that's so hard. What have you learned?
I think there's a lot of value in storytelling and in trying through that storytelling to transform a person to stand in the other person's moccasins, if you like, or shoes. I do believe in that, and that can come by telling real and authentic stories across different contexts. And you'd be surprised. Most Australians absolutely supported the 1967 referendum for Aboriginal people to get the vote. The fact that it took to 1967 is quite horrifying when you think about it. So people understand, I think, that there has been a great injustice. And I think for all of us as Australians, we're only just starting to realise that we never really learnt the stories of our First Nations people when we were at school. We learnt the stories of colonisation. And I had a profound moment on a flight as a young person when I was about 23, sitting with a person from America, also a young person. We had a great chat. And then a person from the UK, we also had a great chat. And the person from the UK ended up saying to me, the problem with Australia is it has no history. And I wasn't mature enough at the time, but I've told that story many times in our school because since that time, it's played on my mind. I've thought about it a lot. And of course, Australia has an incredibly proud history. Yes, it's not European history or the history of the UK.
Yeah.
But we have 60,000, 70,000 years of history that is largely unknown in our nation.
Yeah, you're
That's
right.
our history. And that history now belongs to all Australian people to uphold. It belongs to all of us. And that history is important. Whenever we talk about Australia, we should be talking about our history in its total. Not piecemeal, not
Yes,
just the European component of that history,
that's right.
which is a pinhead. And also we need to acknowledge the displacement that occurred to the people of Australia, our Indigenous people, the people who lived in and on country way before European and lived
Yes.
with law and culture and language quite successful. These are important things. So I find if you take the time to tell the story and to be genuinely committed to it authentically, one thing I've decided in every position I've had is to learn about the local area and the Indigenous area.
Yeah.
So I, have lived in the land of the Waka Waka people, the Kalkadoon, the Pitta Pitta, the Menang, the Bundjalung. Those places I've had the good fortune to live in, I've been on country. It's important. And I tell these stories within our community, and then it becomes not a strange thing.
Yes.
If you get away from the one-shot deal and it becomes part of an ongoing conversation. And I think we're all learning in that space. I am, and I'm sure so many of us are. And not everyone will agree, but I think it would be a hard of heart not to see the injustice and the displacement, just as the Jewish people were displaced
Mm,
And the Holocaust is horrifying.
yeah.
And it would be a strange person who couldn't see the gross injustice of all of that as well.
Yeah. No, I think that's a powerful an analogy to help, just to put it in perspective. What do you think causes in 2022? Like you said, the vast majority of Australians, even back in the 70s, saw that injustice and voted in that referendum. But today, what do you think causes people to still not get it when they don't understand the significance of everything you just unpacked? When you see that, do you have any thoughts on what causes that lack of understanding and awareness, or where it comes from, or what can be done about it?
Well, I'll reference my own journey. For me, as a young person growing up, I was just ignorant. I just didn't know. And I actually think when you take the time to start to find out, it just changes you. So I really think it's
Mm,
just that for the majority of people, they just don't know.
yeah.
And sometimes, it's a cliche, it's an old saying, but you don't know what you don't know. But I actually think at the heart of being human is to take the time to find out, to dwell about these things, to dwell on it, to think about it, to take some time to ponder. Um,
Mm,
I think, yeah, I
yeah.
think that's where it starts, and I just think it is. And look at the world we live in: 24/7 news cycle. Technology has so enriched our lives and so damaged our lives at the same time. Um, when do we get the time to think? These sorts of things are the
Mm,
things you think about in the still places, in the
yeah.
quiet times. Back to the country childhood when I used to lie on the grass and look up at the sky and watch the clouds move. But I was actually thinking, I wasn't just watching clouds move. I was thinking about all different aspects of life and the world and pondering and dreaming of the future. And, we have lost a little bit the joy of boredom, haven't we? There's joy in boredom. It's when our creativity becomes alive. In fact, I think it's hard to be creative if we don't get times where there are spaces to be creative. So that's a whole nother area, really.
Yeah, no, I think you hit on some really important things there, and appreciate you sharing that. Well, Stuart, this is I've so appreciated you sharing that, and it's been really very rich actually, just to hear your thoughts, and I think it'll be a real challenge and encouragement. Let's jump into Leadership Express, and I've got a handful of questions for you as we sort of wrap up. Are you ready?
Mm. Yes.
Okay, the first question. What is a book that you've gifted to other people or recommended frequently?
Few. Going back, How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's a classic.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a good one.
um, that changed me. That was a terrific book because I'd never thought about that. Um, and I think that's helped me to be a little bit more emotionally intelligent as a leader. Um, One I read recently, The Happiest Man on Earth, the Eddie Jacko story, an enormous story of survival and optimism against the odds. Um, I was trying to think, Stephen Covey, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, that had a profound impact on me, particularly two things. Two of the habits, to start with the end in mind and to sharpen the saw. I haven't been very good at sharpening the saw. I've been quite good with starting with the end in mind.
Yeah.
Um, but one of the things you become as you become more aware as a leader and you gain more insight as a leader, you realize you can't look after other people if you're not taking some care of yourself.
Yes.
So, there are three of the books. Good to Great's another one.
Oh, yeah.
I read a lot of Jim Rohn's work when I was younger, and I've recommended that to other colleagues. Um, those sorts of things. things that have impacted upon me.
Mm.
The Richest Man in Babylon, which is one I haven't read for a number of years, but at the time of reading it, that had quite an impact as well. There's some of the ones. There's many. I should spend some more time referring them on to colleagues, but there's so many books that you read, and they all shape you, don't they? And I kind of think you take something great out of every book you read.
Yes.
And I have this belief around, you'll be the same person tomorrow as you were today, and except for the people you meet, the books you read, the places you go, those sorts of things. I think that's true.
Yeah.
So,
I agree.
leaders are also readers. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely agree. What about a great piece of advice? What's a great piece of advice you've received from someone in life, in leadership, and it really stuck with you for some reason?
Oh gosh, I've had a few, or many. But one that comes to mind is I was talking with an elderly member of the school community I was leading in Western Australia, and they had been in state politics at an earlier stage in their life and had been the local member for that area. And one day, when I was struggling with a lot of issues, and I hadn't discussed the issues with Tom, who I was talking to, but he must have just had some sense. He said to me as he turned to walk away that day, he said, "Don't be afraid to lead." And it really had an impact on me because ultimately, sometimes you've got to do tough stuff. You actually just have to lead. Don't be afraid to lead. So that had an impact on me. Another thing that had an impact on me was a mentor, Dr. Murray Evans. I was looking for leadership roles and headship roles, and she said you may need to look further afield. It would be good for your personal and professional growth. And I think he probably saw some of my shortcomings, and he thought, well, if you're to grow, you need to grow away from what you're familiar with. Get
Yes.
away from the familiar and get out of your comfort zone and go and live and work in a new community in a new setting, and through that you'll grow personally and professionally. I took that advice and it was life-changing. And then the third piece of advice, just quickly, again, another mentor, Dr. Audrey Jackson, she said to me a couple of things. And I'm talking about a school here, but it could be any business. It could be, you could be the CEO of one of the world's leading banks, and this would apply to you. Some of the best work you will do is away from your school, or it could be away from your business.
Yeah.
And that was about getting out of the everyday and the, just immersion in what's going on every day and getting away and thinking about the things you really need to be doing.
So good.
And I followed that advice. And one of the ways that I follow that currently is, and again, it's from another mentor, Graham Harvey, who wrote a very interesting book called Seducing a Vigilante Customer, which is one I've recommended as well.
Yeah, great.
Look, Graham said you've got to spend at least a day a quarter future storming. And that's true. Again, otherwise you don't think of any bigger picture stuff. And some organisations would do that, every week and every month. I make sure that I do it every quarter, a day a quarter, just future storming. That's been good advice as well. And a piece of advice I've learnt myself that I give myself is don't assume when you first join a new organisation that everyone knows what they're doing. That was a rookie error. I just thought because I'd left an organisation surrounded by people who were pretty well on top of what they were doing, that was just the case. Everything. Now that sounds very naive, doesn't it? And people might even be having a chuckle as they listen to that. But essentially, that was the error.
I love it. I think it's something that everyone's done. That's why I'm laughing. It's not silly. Yes. It's because I am thinking of how I did that. It's such great advice because unless you're intentional about not doing that, I think it's something that's really easy to do. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's so true. And it's so true. And and so that benefit of insight now, just makes you a better leader in the future context. That's for sure. Oh, look, there was one other piece of advice from Reverend Andrew Syme, who, when I was first appointed a head, he was a mentor again as well. And you could apply this to being in leadership in any organisation. Where are the still places? Who is this person? Who is at my birthday party? And there was another one I just can't pull out of my head at the moment. But the still places, the time to ponder and think.
Yeah.
Who is this person? Who am I really? We don't often ponder that. And who's at my birthday party? Who matters in my life? Who matters in my life? And the other thing he said to me, which I believe applies to every leader, never miss your child's own birthday.
Yeah.
That's important, isn't it? And sometimes I'm sure there's people out there listening today, they've had to. So I think don't beat yourself up too much. But, gee, it's made me get to birthdays that I thought would be impossible to get to. It just made it happen.
Yeah. I love that.
Another one, again, which is advice I would personally give that I've only started to live out in the last few years, a little bit too late in some cases, is always take a phone call from your own child, because invariably they're probably ringing because they really need you for something. And
That's good.
so I've done that now. If the phone rings from one of my own children, I take the call.
Yeah.
That can be incredibly hard to do. There'll be people out there saying, well, that's impossible. Well, you can make the impossible possible. It's just by it's a mindset shift.
It is. It's like that.
And it's important. It's important.
It's like that thing that happens when you're off sick, or when you're, it's like the mystery of the last week before you go on vacation, how you can wrap so many things up. I think it is when it's like, where there's a will, there's a way. If you decide I'm always going to answer that call, then you can, a majority of the time, you can move things around to make it happen, if that's your key priority. And they're wonderful priorities to have. So wonderful thoughts. Thank you for sharing them.
Thank you.
So last question for you, Stuart. If you could only give one piece of leadership advice to a young leader, what would you say?
Take the opportunity. Doors open for a reason. Have the courage to walk through the door. If you're asked to do something, do it, even if you feel you're not capable yet of doing that. If someone else has asked you to do it, they see something in you that you may not be seeing in yourself as yet. And it'd be unusual for me to quote a racing car driver, but the late Peter Brock used to be in a television commercial that said, if you bite off more than you chew, chew hard. And this is the thing. Don't rule yourself out. If someone's asking you to do something, they see you as capable of doing it. If you think you're not quite ready, chew hard. You will be capable. And often the answer is in the doing. You start out sometimes working on a problem or a context that you just have no answer for, but the answer is in the doing.
Yeah.
And as you set yourself to whatever you're wrestling with, and you start to unpack it, you start to work on it, and you might draw on wise counsel from friends around you or mentors around you, but ultimately the answer is in the doing. So I would just say, be prepared to step in and to lead and to seek the opportunities, and if asked to do something, to do it. And look, never rule yourself out. So many times, and I'm sure all leaders and CEOs, etc., have had someone who really is aspirational, is looking at a role, but then I won't apply. I couldn't possibly get the position. I wouldn't even be considered. I'd hardly get an interview. Well, don't rule yourself out.
Yeah.
Let someone else rule you out. It's crazy to rule yourself out. You actually might be the perfect fit. You might be the authentic leader that organization needs at that given time, or you might be the leader who's going to be able to solve some of the issues that they're dealing with, and so let them rule you out or rule you in. Don't rule yourself out.
So good. Yeah, I love that. Don't rule yourself out. And so often the learning is in the doing. How true is that?
Right.
If we think of the most formative things we've ever done, where we learnt the most, it's often where we dropped the ball or made mistakes. And it's often where we were doing something and we went, oh, wow, okay, I'm really in the deep end here. And that's where so much growth is. Growth's uncomfortable. And that's so good.
When I mentioned three things, Jono, on that.
Yes.
I think admit mistakes. Oh gosh, there was an era where people just wouldn't admit mistakes. Like when you get something wrong, apologize, genuinely apologize, admit the mistake, and move forward. And don't be afraid to show a bit of vulnerability. If you're unsure about something, it's not a sign of weakness. Like vulnerability is strength. It means you're real. Be who you are. Don't pretend to be someone else. Those, when you mention mistakes, it made me think about that. As leaders, we all make mistakes. The thing, of course, is to always learn from them, but be prepared to apologise when you make a mistake or you make the wrong call. I think that's a show of strength, not a show of weakness as a leader.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. That's wonderful. Well, for those who would like to find out more about Lindisfarne or to follow you on social media, LinkedIn or Twitter, is there anywhere people can find you and the school online?
Definitely can find the school online simply by Googling Lindisfarne Anglican Grammar School, and you'll find the website and all of that sort of thing, and news articles and different things. By following me on LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn. I accept invitations. I should be more active. My profile's a bit out of date because I'm too busy being a leader. That'd be one thing. Advice I give is keep your profile up to date. Don't do what I've done. It's out of date. It's well out of date. It needs a refresh. I think it's very important actually in this day and age. It's something that I just must make myself do, is refresh that, because so many people will connect with you through LinkedIn. I think that's how we might have initially connected.
Yeah, I think
Jono,
so.
through LinkedIn, something like that. Yeah.
Well, the good thing is,
yeah, definitely.
A lot of people will be listening to this. The way people digest podcasts is there'll be some who listen straight away, but it might be 2023 or beyond when others listen. So you can look great to people, and they can search, and down the track they'll go, oh wow, Stuart's updated it. It's all updated. So that's the beauty of the podcast. It's not live, so no pressure, Stuart.
Right. That's good. I will do that. Now I have to be accountable because I've publicly stated that, so it makes me accountable to do it now.
Yeah, it's about as big as accountability gets, putting it out there on a podcast. So
that's right.
That's gold.
That's right.
Well, I want to thank our listeners for tuning in. It's been a wonderful episode, very life-giving, and just some really great wisdom around leadership, and also leadership and some really important issues around social justice and bridging the gap. And I've really loved today. Don't forget, I also have the John O'White Leadership Podcast and the Leadership Question of the Day podcast, two other places where you can go to invest in your leadership. But I want to finish today by saying a massive thank you to you, Stuart, for being so generous with your time, for sharing so many great anecdotes and principles of leadership. It's been a real joy. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you very much, Jono. Thanks for having me. It was actually a great privilege. So thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast as much as I did. If you're joining us for the first time, don't forget to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, including our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from all over the world in all different roles, in different industries, answer these 7 questions on leadership, and leaders give these in-depth answers around how they spend their time, a book that's been significant for them. It's just a gold mine. It's completely free to access, so go to consultclarity.org and look for that. We'd also love to interview you about your leadership. I believe your experience, your life, your context means that you have advice on leadership that other leaders can learn from. Yes, you, if you're going, not me, well, no, I really believe you would have something to add. So if you're looking for a way to give back, it's completely free to get involved. And we would love to interview you through the 7 questions on leadership. You just go to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form and get involved. We have a free resource on our website called the Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook, 10 world-class leaders giving their thoughts on leadership, and that's completely free. It's available on our homepage, consultclarity.org, right at the top, so make sure you go and get that and download it today. And we have a free daily email that you can subscribe to. We send this out to over 15,000 leaders from around the world. And it contains the highlights of content from our podcasts, our blogs, our books we're reading. It's got the best content, and it gives you exclusive, limited, early access to our masterclasses, workshops, new products, special offers. It's all for our subscribers. You can go to consultclarity.org/subscribe and join 15,000 other leaders. And you know, my gift to you is to work really hard, particularly through the Leadership Conversations podcast. I have been blown away by the quality of the leaders, and I'm learning as much as anyone in doing these interviews. So I'm having a great time. And my gift to you is to keep lining up the best leaders I can to invest in your leadership. Your gift to me, if you're finding this helpful, there is something that you could do that would help us out massively. And that is to write a review and to leave a rating for our podcast or wherever you're watching or listening to this. I can't tell you how much that helps us out. Also, subscribe or follow. It really does make a difference in helping us to help more leaders become everything they're meant to be. Another thing that means a lot to me personally is when I see our community share our content. So if you do share this or any other piece of content on social media, then thank you, and please do that. And look for me, Jono White, or Clarity, and tag us in your post. Our team is always looking for posts to engage with from our community, and there's also a chance that we'll share your content to go beyond and share it with our followers. Last of all, you can check out my book. It's called Step Up or Step Out: How to Deal with Difficult People Even If You Hate Conflict. I wrote this book because 50% of the coaching sessions I have with leaders, this topic comes up again and again and again. And it's this idea of, how do I have this difficult conversation? How do I lead this person better when I'm finding them difficult? Or in some cases, you look and you say, I think I might be leading a difficult person. They're just quite difficult to lead, or I'm finding them quite difficult to lead. So there's a 3-step process that I unpack in Step Up or Step Out. And the amazing thing, and I've literally done this myself, and I've heard it anecdotally from other leaders as I've coached them, is that if you follow this process, you will see that person step up and change their behavior or make a decision, which is to step out some of the time. 95% of the time, people will step up or step out in just 4 weeks. And I stand by that. It's you have to read the book to understand, but I really do believe in it, and I've experienced it firsthand. It works. So you can go to Amazon, look up Step Up or Step Out Jono White, or store.consultclarity.org/book. Well, thank you so much for listening. We're going to be back with a new episode next time of the Leadership Conversations podcast. And I hope today has helped you to take another step towards becoming the leader you're meant to be. See you next time.